Hello everyone, it is Friday. You know, normally I'm excited about Friday, but right now I'm kind of sad because honestly we've had such an amazing week here. It's been beyond what I even thought it was going to be. So beneficial in so many ways. I've learned some ridiculous amounts of knowledge. We've had so much fun. We've bonded, we've grown together. It's just been such a cool team building thing, but also so informative. We've got a lot of cool stuff for you guys in store over the next probably year. And we're just so excited, man, that you got to come out here. And I really, really hope we can do more of this. We'll be able to have more events. Maybe we'll have some stuff spread out across the United States, unless you guys can make it out here. But we had such a great time. Who knows what's going to come from the future? But we have a lot to talk about. We have stuff to give away. We've got Jason here for one last day. We're going to talk to him. It is War Stories, and it's time to fire away.
Glad you made it, because we were training for the invasion of Japan.
Report team 774.
Alright, get his attention. Alright, come on, go.
I'd like to start out also by saying thank you guys for tuning in. Again, I say this a lot, but honestly, if it wasn't for all of you fans, we wouldn't probably be here doing this. So you are a big part of this, and we appreciate you guys tuning in all the time, being here, being in comments, sharing the videos. It's really you guys have a lot to do with this, and honestly, if there was no one here, we wouldn't be here. So thank you all for tuning in all the time. War Stories, we know how it goes. Here's the deal. Okay, we had so much fun this week. We have a lot to talk about. We don't have to talk about training in general. I do want to tell you that Jason did spend a lot of time defending our world from evil and putting it in its tracks where it needs to be. And we owe you and many men and women a major thank you for sacrificing, not as in like, hey, my life as like life and death, but your lifestyle, your life and who you are. We're going to talk a little bit about how that experience can change people's lives, right? And what it's like coming back after going over to war zones. And it's different for everybody, but we're going to talk a little bit about who knows what here. But it is, even if you don't pay the ultimate sacrifice, you definitely pay a sacrifice. There is a sacrifice put upon it, whether it's time away from your family, whether it's the loss of some of the closest people that are to you in your life that you've become close with. There's more than what we as a general audience to this press or whatever it is, way more than we know. As you know, we had Justin here not long ago, and Justin is friends with Kevin and with Jason, and he shared a lot of this insight. We don't have videos, we don't have photos today, and that's not what we're here for anyways. We have real. That's what we're going to be today. We're going to be real, and we've talked a lot about certain things. There's things that we're not going to talk about, and I don't want to talk about. I know Jason probably doesn't want to talk about, and it's fine, but I think what I intend is maybe some insight on, there's a lot of people who were never in the military. And I know I come from a military family. My grandfather's dad, uncles, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, niece, my whole family, a military family. And I didn't get to serve. And it was always something that I thought, man, if I did, I probably would still be there. So maybe it's a good thing I'm here now. And it's always something I thought about in my life, like maybe, if I have a couple regrets, I always wonder, like, what would I have done? What would I have been? How would that have looked? Would I even be here? What would I do? So it's always been a thing in my mind, and I just never did it. But it's too late now. That's for sure.
Right.
But I definitely appreciate the time, the commitment, and I know it was a choice, but the commitment that you've made, the commitment that your family's made, including your wife and your kids, and there's a lot of men and women out there who have moms and dads and brothers and sisters and friends, and you take that responsibility outside of your family and friends, and it becomes a bigger responsibility because he represents us as Americans, and it's just a cool thing. And I don't want to get way too off on the subject here because I could talk about this for a long time. Military history is a big part of my life. I've been to a lot of war zones, not active war zones, but just going and, whether it be Normandy or Vietnam, or, a lot of these places, I chose to go there because I wanted to, and I just have this deep love for the history and respect for, people who do courageous things, in the face of fear. They do it anyways. It's courage. It's being brave. And we have first responders on here all the time that also do that. They put their, we don't want to say life on the line because they're very well trained at what they do. So it decreases your risk of, or your opportunity of having failure. So when you train, like what we've been talking about, and you do these things, you definitely are putting your life on the line and risking certain things. But why you train and why you become good is so that you lower, and I guess this is maybe just my mind talking, I may be completely wrong, but I think that you lower your possibility of a failure, and so to speak. So even though you are risking your life, you're lowering your chances of paying the ultimate sacrifice. So I know I'm going off here, but I will let you tell them a little bit about you. Why did you join the Army? What did that look like? And then whatever you want to talk about, we can just have an open discussion.
I appreciate that. So first, thanks for the week. Thanks for having me out here.
Oh man, yeah.
It's been a great week. Come out here and enjoy some time in sunny Idaho. Love this part of the country. Really had a good time with all you guys. Had a great couple of days of shooting with a bunch of crew members from Alien Gear. Really, really cool. Good range. I can't thank you guys enough.
We had some good times outside the range too, which
we did.
was really awesome.
We did. It was
and I
good.
thank you for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good discussions and getting to know Nate and other guys here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, believe it or not, I ended up going in the Army because I was out of work. I got laid off from 3 jobs inside of a couple months.
Thank God. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
It worked its way out one way or the other, right? So I didn't know anything about the Army. I didn't have anybody that I could ask. Walked into the recruiter's office in 1984, and 3 weeks later I was gone on my way to basic training.
Dang, 3 weeks.
Yeah. Well, and that was kind of a part of my once I went in there and started talking to him, I was kind of like, okay, I was 19. I've been out of high school for, I don't know, 8 or 9 months or something like that, and I don't even know why. I was just kind of like went in and started talking to him, and then something tripped in my brain, and I was like, okay, I think I need to, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it and go and leave instead of going on, because there was a couple of job specialties I looked at initially, and it was, I think I wanted to be a helicopter crew, because I wanted to fly helicopters. That's what drew me there in the first place. And you can't just do that off the street. And so
probably a good thing.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Yeah. So the short version of the story is I had to wait. This was in February, and I would have had to wait until November before I could get in to be a helicopter mechanic. And I wasn't going to wait till November because I figured I'd end up getting a really good job or another opportunity, and then I'd be question my decision, and I'd have to have all this turmoil and indecision. So I was like, I'm leaving, and ended up being going in the infantry, and which was the best thing that could happen to me, as far as that goes. So that was really good. Didn't know any better about anything, so I didn't know about Special Forces. I didn't know about Airborne Rangers. I didn't know anything about anything, and so I ended up going in the infantry, and they brought up the option of do you want to serve overseas? We got this and this and this, and you can go to Germany. And I thought that sounds pretty cool. So I went to Germany and spent 2.5 years over there, and the mechanized infantry, which means you're infantry, but you ride around in these armored vehicles and like tanks and not tanks, but personnel carriers and things like that. So what I realized pretty quickly was that was not the Army that I thought it was. We weren't doing, I thought the whole Army was like, doing commando stuff all the time and shooting guns, and it's not like that for most people in the Army. And so very, very long story condensed down so that it doesn't take me all day to tell it, but
we got all day,
I
man.
left from Germany, learned about the Rangers, learned that there was a Ranger battalion. I grew up in Oregon. There was a Ranger battalion up in Tacoma, so I thought, well, that's where I'm going to go because it's halfway close to home. And so I did. I made my way up there, which basically meant I through a series of events, I ended up getting a Ranger school slot. So I ended up Ranger qualified just by going to the school. Got promoted to sergeant. Got a slot to airborne school, and during a series of events, and then it came time for me to re-enlist after my first enlistment was finished, and you have a re-enlistment guy at every unit. So I went in there and started talking to him, and he goes, I said, I want to go to 2nd Ranger Battalion at Fort Lewis, Washington, and he goes, I can't get you into 2nd Ranger Battalion because they have basically a hiring process. You can't just walk in there, but I can get you to Fort Lewis. And I said, okay, if you get me to Fort Lewis, I'll figure it out. So I still had contact with a former company commander of mine, a captain who, before I met him, was in 2nd Ranger Battalion as a platoon leader. And I got him on the phone, and he gave me some really good advice. He said, he still had the phone number. He said, call this number, and you're going to talk to this lady, and she's the battalion secretary, and you tell her that you want an appointment to go in and talk to the command sergeant major. And I'm talking to him on the phone. I'm like, yeah, I can do that? He goes, yeah, you'll be fine. If this is what you want, this is what you have to do. You got to kind of make your own luck. And so I picked up the phone and called, and this was 1988. And I drove up there, so I was home on vacation in Oregon. Got in the car one day, drove all the way 4 hours up to Tacoma. I was already in the Army, so I could get on the base and all that stuff. And I walked in there and did an interview, and scared to death. It was one of the most stressful things I'd done in my career up to that point, because just walking in there, and
you just wanted it so bad, I'm sure. Like that's.
I did,
Yeah.
and so one thing led to another. They got me orders there, and then they have a process that you have to go to the regimental headquarters down in Georgia and go through a 2 or 3 week long thing for integration and make sure you can do all the physical stuff and everything else that goes on in the regiment. So I did that and passed it, and then I came back and I spent 4 years there, 4.5 years there, and then I went to assessment selection for the Tier 1 unit at Fort Bragg, and I passed that. Took me twice to do that. First time I didn't make it.
Can you say what do you have to do to pass?
It's a hiring process. I say pass. It'd be like it's kind of like saying I went to a job interview. When I say pass, I got hired. So
you don't have to. You don't get timed, or you don't have to pass shooting.
There's a hiring and selection process that's not very widely known. So I don't really talk about it publicly too much.
Got it.
But it's as funny as this sounds. There's no shooting at all. There's no commando skills. There's no anything that you would think is Rambo or Chuck Norris type of stuff. It's just they have a process that they use that works really well,
Nice.
and it doesn't involve any commando stuff at all. None. Surprisingly enough.
Makes
But it's
sense
all,
though when you think about it.
It makes a lot of sense, and kind of assesses whether you're motivated, self-starter, can work without a lot of supervision, think for yourself and make decisions on your feet and that kind of thing. So it takes about a month to go through that. And then as the timing worked out, I went home. My wife was pregnant. I went home after I got hired. I went back to Fort Lewis for, I guess, about a month or so. And my son was born during the 2 or 3 weeks while I was there. And then I left to go down to Fort Bragg to go to the training course. And my wife still had to sell our house, and she had a brand new baby and a 2-year-old.
Oh man!
And, we had my our third child a couple years later. We have 3 children, and my 2 youngest ones are in the Army now. My oldest one lives close by my wife and I, so we get to see her pretty regularly. And the other 2 we're in North Carolina now, and the other 2 are out in Colorado for the time being. So it's tough having them away, but
Yeah. So I guess that's one thing that I know we could talk about is, man, how awesome is your wife to be able to, I mean, I got a baby at home right now, and I'm thinking like a baby and a 2-year-old, and you're selling your house and you're gone, like, holy cow. Wow.
right.
Like that's
Yeah.
a lot going
Right.
on. What an awesome
I
woman.
yeah, I almost can't. I almost can't talk about that because it's a little emotional for me to. She's amazing.
Yeah.
So the saying, and we've been married almost 32 years, and the saying in our relationship is, calamity only happens when I'm away from the house. She's dealt with, we had her. I mean, nothing life threatening, but it's always stuff breaks or doesn't work right or bad weather. We had I was gone in 1994 when Hurricane Fran came through, and I was out in California actually doing some training, and which we did pretty regularly. And Hurricane Fran came through, and no damage or anything, but the power was out for 4 days. And I don't think I've been home the entire time we've been married with the power off for maybe 4 hours, maybe an overnight. My wife's
Yeah.
dealt with it a half a dozen times. I've hardly ever dealt with, so car repairs, sick kids, dogs to the vet, just
Yeah.
all that stuff. And it's always, most of the time it's her dealing with it by herself. And it's absolutely amazing.
That is absolutely amazing.
It is. And most guys I know that come from the same, military experience and many years of marriage, everyone's like, yeah, it never happens when you're at home. Your wife's always at home dealing with it by herself.
Right. Well, and then there's the, the unknown, I know a lot of times you're overdoing training, but sometimes you get deployed. And I know we have a lot of veterans here that watch the show, and, they get deployed, and then I can't imagine what it's like to be at home not knowing,
Right.
the unknown thing. And, you got to have faith or something,
Yep.
whatever you have.
Yep.
And, that, you're going to get taken care of. But again, that comes with training, right? So when you start to go down that road, you can, what I try to do is quickly come to a halt, knowing that, again, you resort to your training because your training is what's going to keep you coming back. A lot of it. Some of it's luck, I would say, maybe, but, you're good at what you do. You're always in a bad situation. I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about. I don't,
No, but it's a good point. I mean, good training is reduces the risk. Mm-hmm. There's bad training too, but if you're doing good training that's realistic, you're going to reduce the risk of injury or death. And I think that's an exponential thing. The more realistic the training is, and the better you can do at that, and plan it properly, conduct it properly. And that's a 2 or 3 day long discussion right there by itself. But it's because there's plenty of people out there that do training, and in scare quotes training, which is it's kind of like you're not really getting much out of it. And maybe that's because they don't have the resources. Maybe it's because they don't have the right people doing it, or the people who got tasked with conducting the training maybe don't have enough experience to really be doing it, but they're doing it anyway because that's all they have. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah. I know there's some things that you want to talk about. We were talking about last night and stuff. I don't even know how to segue into certain things, but we were talking about, there's after September 11th, which I thought was first let's start here, which I think was really cool. By the way, United We Stand. We get to tell you who's winning this gun today. We're also Slight Tactical. Kevin is here. He's going to hook you all up with the Second Amendment sling, so make sure you stay tuned to the end. Not only are you going to get the sling, you're going to get the front and rear attachments. So make sure you're sticking around. He might even hook you up with a t-shirt. I can't tell you how beneficial it was to have both of you guys here, and Kevin, how instrumental it was. And I've told Kevin this to his face. He was really hands-on, literally hands-on, and just cool to watch. And we appreciate, Kevin came up here as well, and he wasn't the one in front of the camera all the time, but it was really cool. Not only just to have him be there and watch it all go down, but to spend some time hanging out. I mean, we were like three amigos for a while.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
It was so much fun, man.
Yeah, Kev, thanks for all of that. Really appreciate it. And I don't know if your wife, who I know personally, is watching this as well, but thank you for sharing it with us for a week.
Yeah.
Helped out a lot.
Appreciate it. Big time. And I got to thank my wife for sharing me this week as well.
Absolutely.
Because we did get to hang out once at the house and have a fire and do all that, which was really awesome. But three guys get to talking, and you've been shooting at the range all day, and then you get to talking, and then you get to talking, and you're wondering when you're going to get to sleeping.
Right.
So it was a good time, man.
Absolutely.
So September 11th, I remember what was really neat. What you said the other day was, World War II. People thought during that time, like, man, this is going on for a long time, and then it comes to a close, or Vietnam even, and you think about September 11th. Twin Towers get hit. A couple other planes were part of the plan, and Pentagon gets hit, and who knows what could have happened. But we
2 days ago, 18 years ago, 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I forgot. I've already been so busy this week that I forgot we just talked about that day before yesterday.
Yeah, and you would make an interesting point that here we are 18 years later.
Yeah. So the point we were talking about, and I think this is worth bringing up because I think it's fascinating. And I actually just I had that article open on the browser on my phone, and I saw it this morning, the one that I mentioned to you. So there's and I don't remember the guy who wrote it, but he's a military vet. I think it's on Ranger Up. I don't know, but anyway, he quoted the numbers from World War II. During World War II, the percentage of the entire U.S. population that was in the military was 11.5%, and that was 11.5% of the entire population. That was like, I think our U.S. population was 100 or 110 million at that point, and we're about 325, 330 now. In Vietnam, the number was 4.3% of the entire country was actually in the service, all four branches. And then since 9/11, the percentage of the entire population that's in the military is 0.45 of 1%. 0.0. So less than 1/2 of 1% of the entire population is what's in the military. And we're going, World War II we got attacked at Pearl Harbor, did what we did in the Pacific and in Europe, and everything was done in 6 years. I'm being generous, probably more like 4.5. Vietnam, I think we were involved there from the very early days, 6 or 7 years.
Yep.
7, 8 years, and here we are, just turned over 18 and going strong. And what I mean when I say going strong is we're still committed. We're still doing what we're doing. I'm not saying that like I'm all proud of the fact that we still got guys deployed, because I kind of wish we didn't. But it's a smaller percentage of a larger population. I think the number that I read, not in that article, but I saw this somewhere else. It was something like about 250,000 guys are, from the beginning to the end now, over this 18-year span, it's about 250,000 service members that are actually, on the ground engaged. That's a pretty small number. That takes the 0.45 down to 0.0 something.
Yeah.
It's so small. Just food for thought.
Yeah, and I know we could get into some conversations that does it end? When? How? Where? Will it? How long will it go? I mean,
It's hard to say.
it's hard to say.
It is, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
This isn't the place to
No,
talk
it
about the
isn't.
politics of
It
it or
isn't.
anything like
It
that.
isn't. I know.
And but I think that there's a couple of things that converge together for me, because I've been thinking about and talking about this for a while. I had the opportunity to do some work with a company I did 5-6 years ago. I was working with, and we did some different kind of some uncommon training courses for some military folks back around 13, 14 time frame. And part of the stuff that we talked about there was what how high the approval ratings are for the military. You know, it's like they're consistently in the U.S. surveys, the military is up in the high 80s or low 90s approval rate. I mean, our Congress is in single digits.
Yeah.
And then there's
Right.
varying degrees of different
Right.
career choices, and they kind of rank order them, and the military is always on top,
That's awesome.
hands down. Perception of the U.S. population has of the military is what I mean. So there's that, and then there's, we used to talk to these guys about, we had portions of what we did in these courses. We talked about post-traumatic stress, and we talked about, what does it mean to be, that guy on the battlefield? What's your personal identity? I'm Jason, or I'm a sergeant major, right? There's my personal identity, my professional identity, and for a lot of us, that ends up blending together for many years. It did for me. And just some different stuff. And then there's the other, separate of that, just doing some different reading, and I find out that, because this is stuff that I had my head down, shovel busy, working for 25 years in the Army, so I didn't really learn a lot of this stuff that I've learned since I retired. But scientists and people who study this stuff, doctors and everything, brain surgeons or neuro people or whatever, they say that the human brain doesn't fully develop until a person's 27 or 28 years old.
Mm-hmm. The male
Yeah,
brain.
yeah. Girls
Females
are
are like 14, 15,
Yeah.
right?
a little bit younger, yeah,
I know.
23, 24, whatever. But
Yeah, I know,
so
yeah.
so guys go in the military, regardless of branch. Guys and girls go in the military at 17 or 18 or 19, most of us, and that means that so if you split that into thirds, right? 27, 28 years old. That means the last 9 years of your brain development, you're in the military. If you are.
Mm-hmm.
8 or 9 or 10, depending on when you went in and when you're, technically when you're fully developed, which I don't
Yeah.
think I can look back to when I was 27 and go, March 27th of that year is when I fully developed my brain. It just,
The song went off in your head.
right, exactly. I stopped being a dumbass and became
Yeah, exactly.
But the point
Well,
is,
does that ever stop? No.
so I got to thinking about that, and I'm like, I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's just different. Meaning, a 18 or 19-year-old person who lives their life and doesn't do any military service is a different person than somebody who goes in the military. And I'm not going to say that it's worse or it's better, because I don't think that's fair. Right. Some people would say, well, they all should have served, and if they didn't, and I'm going to look down on them. That's not true, and I don't believe that, because we don't have room for everybody to serve. The Army doesn't need to be,
Right.
How big would it be if everybody had to serve? Out of 320 million people, what do we got? 40 million
Yeah, right.
kids between 17 and 24 that could go in and do, compulsory service for 18 months. There's countries around the world where they do that, and the military couldn't deal with that many people. We don't need that many people. And so I don't think it's a case of it's good or bad. It's just different. And the part that I've learned that kind of resonates with me personally is I don't think there's a lot of people trying, but we're not doing a good job. And I don't know that we can do a good job putting vets retiring or just getting out after their first or second tour, putting them back into society voluntarily. Most of them we don't throw out. Most of them choose to get out and they
Right.
go back to civilian life on their own. And I think we have a really hard time taking the difference, because if you go in the military or you don't go in the military, the difference in the last third of your brain development from 17 or 18 or 19 out to 27 or 28, and it's a full third of your life. That's and I refer to it as the probably the most important one, because it's all of the lifelong stuff that you're going to learn in the last part of your development when your brain's finally developing. And so I think we have a difficult time putting people back into civilian life, because I know for a fact all 4 of the services are not really good at that. It's like, hey, you're done. Here's your papers. Get out. And there's a lot of volunteer organizations. There's a lot of 501c3 not-for-profits, and I mean a lot of people are trying to help
Right.
people, and a lot of them, frankly, are focused on post-traumatic stress and a lot of things that that are related to that. And I applaud their efforts, and I don't
Yeah.
have any issue with that at all. But there's other ones that are just doing simple things like resume writing and skill development to go to job interviews and stuff like that, which some people think that's some people who are not military think it's kind of silly that we have to teach vets how to do that, but
Where
they
they
didn't have to
learn
learn
it
it
in
at
college,
18 or
Right.
22 when they graduated college or whatever. So it's not like they're not stupid.
Right.
Frankly, you talk to an infantryman, in a gunfight in Afghanistan or Iraq, that guy's making some split-second decisions that are life and death that most people couldn't deal with because they're not trained. So the military guy's not trained to write a resume and go to a job interview, but he can do combat-related stuff and survive that. And the other people are, well, I'm trained to do job interviews and resume writings. They don't get to look at each other as though the other one is stupid.
Wow, that's
it,
right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so when I went in the military, when I went in the Army in 1984, nobody said, thanks for your service. It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I've had a hard time. I've actually had not a hard time. I've had a frustrating time. I don't know how to act when somebody says thanks for your service. I'm like, you don't have to thank me. I was already there, And that sort of started after 9/11, And I was in the Army for 17 years already when 9/11 happened, and people started thanking me for my service. I'm kind of like, you're welcome. I don't know what to say, It didn't make me angry. I never got in an argument with anybody about it. So I was just kind of like, I didn't know how to be on the receiving end of that thanks because I wasn't used to hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, hey, go find a Vietnam vet and tell them thanks. Let me introduce you to my wife and you can thank her.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I appreciate the sentiment, and I'm not trying to look down on it, but for me, it's kind of like, in all honesty, I was being more selfish than I was being selfless. I was doing what I wanted to do, serving my own needs as much or more than I was serving the military's, for sure.
That was like you wanted to shoot guns. You wanted to be an infantry guy. That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
Your
and I
needs,
wanted
that's
to
what
be
you
a
wanted to
special operations guy, a tier
Yeah.
1 operator. I wanted to identify with that. I mean, that was,
be. Yeah.
and I did, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm not I don't have any regrets over any of that. We've kind of gotten into this habit of, well, I have to thank a vet for his service, and I really appreciate it when people say that. But I guess I just don't know how to act. And I finally got to the point where I'm like, hey, you don't have to thank you for saying that, but you don't have to thank me. It's cool that you said it, and I appreciate it, but next time you're at Golden Corral having a buffet, and there's an old guy there with his Navy hat on from Vietnam or whatever, just go buy that guy some dinner.
Yes. Yes.
Or whatever.
Right.
Whatever. Or some kid that's in the airport in his in his uniform, or whatever. I mean, however that manifests itself. I don't really care. But the bigger issue for me is, so you got service members on one side coming out of the military, and you've got the population in general, and neither one of us knows how to deal with the other one. right? People look at service members and it's like there's something wrong with them because they've been in a war zone and they're mentally damaged and they might have post-traumatic stress and maybe they're going to go crazy. And it's like that's just wrong. So, I had a funny story a friend of mine told me a while back. His they were having a discussion about. No, I'm not going to tell that story. Never mind. I'm not going to tell that story. But people are trying so hard to help veterans, and I really appreciate it. All of us appreciate it. And I think the thing that most of us are missing is that the vets themselves are missing this. We're not dealing well enough with the change in identity. That's the thing that I finally figured out after I think I've been retired for about 5 years, and so most guys you talk to, they're like, I get out and I go out here and I start working for some company or I do whatever I'm going to do, and things are not the same. Mm-hmm. There's something missing, and I'm not 100% sure that I figured this out 100%, but I think a big portion of it is you're not doing anything that you feel is important anymore. And that's not to say that if you work at Alien Gear and you're a vet, that this is an unimportant job. It's just not the same as having to make those decisions,
right?
And on behalf of the entire country.
Playing the game of life for real.
Right. Right. And I'm not even talking about I have to be in the middle of this big engagement shooting my machine gun in Iraq, right? Or Afghanistan. I mean, when I say me, I don't mean me. I'm talking about,
a scenario,
just the scenario of whatever veteran we're talking about. It doesn't even have to be something that extreme. It could be nothing more than, you're traveling in uniform and you're responsible to act responsible because people look at you, they see you might be the only military guy that 50 people who are civilians see in a year or 2 years, because it depends on where you're traveling to and what people do. They may not interact with military folks at all. Mm-hmm. And how so when you're on active duty and that responsibility is yours, or you should, and you have leaders, NCOs and officers that help inculcate that in your brain. It's kind of like if you work at some private company and you get on a plane to fly somewhere and you're walking around in your shower shoes, your flip-flops, and a set of Daisy Dukes, and you're cut off. I'm talking about a guy, right? Your cut off T-shirt, and no military person should do that because you're not conducting yourselves like people would expect that you would do that. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's anyway.
I want to talk about something. There's a gentleman who I'm not going to talk about who's probably watching right now. Definitely watching right now. And he's seen these shows. And you know who you are. And he spent almost 12 years overseas. And he's transitioning back. And it's not always easy. And I'm not asking for this person at all.
Right.
Make that clear. I'm not asking for this person. I'm asking because I want to know. One, how did you transition back? And how does one person transition back? How? What? I mean, is there even an answer?
It's a great question. And the answer that I have come to, my own conclusion is the transition is rest of your life. And that's not a bad thing either. Just got to understand it takes however long it takes to go through your initial training when you go into whichever service you go into, and and I'm still trying to unpack this because I wasn't learning it. I was doing what I had to do when I went in the Army, and everyone else is doing the same thing that they're doing, getting through their boot camp, basic training, whatever that looks like, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, whatever. You don't think about what's going on in the development of your brain or the change in your character or your level of responsibility or whatever. When we get out, we start going back. I've talked to a bunch of fellow retirees about this. All my buddies are 90% of the people I hang out with when I'm not with my wife at home are either retired cops or cops that are getting ready to retire, or all my military buddies that I know. And I've come to the conclusion after talking to all these guys about all these different things, and these are not like, we cry in our beer and woe is us and it's all emotional and everything else, but there's the struggle is different for everybody, and my conclusion is that it's going to take a good bit of time to get to the point where we're comfortable. I don't think it ever goes away, because the last third of your brain development was while you were in the military. It's not, you can't go back and turn that off. And so I think part of the equation is to recognize that it's different, and it's like some people are like, eventually it's going to go away. What's going to go away? The last third of your brain development is going to go away? That can't happen. It's an impossibility. And so I think it's better to look at it from the perspective of, yes, I'm a veteran and I served and I did whatever I did. Whether you're barrel-chested freedom fighter and you slide down a rope and shoot people in the face and jump out of airplanes, or you do something that's not that, and I don't care what that is, because they're all important. When you get to the end of that, you're no longer serving that 330 million people across the entire country. You know what I'm saying? So it's a hard thing to leave that behind. Harder for some of us than others. And I know there's a huge veteran suicide issue. I'm aware of that. And I got a lot of friends who are actively trying to help people deal with that kind of stuff as well. And now I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, man.
No, it's all right. But so back to the transition. I personally think that a couple conversations I've had with friends of mine over the years, like, hey, you've been retired for a while. It's kind of scary knowing that the security blanket of it, it's like, hey, I'm working hard in the Army. I've been doing what I've been doing. I got 22, 25, 27 years, and whatever that looks like. And it's like, it's scary. And I said, it is scary, but you got to do it, because, some of us want to hang on and stay in as long as we can because we're averse to change. There's nothing wrong with being that person. But what I said to a couple friends of mine, we were having this discussion, I said, there's no such thing as a 75-year-old man who's still in the Army. They don't allow that. Everybody has to get out. Mm-hmm. And we've had World War I, we had Revolutionary War, Civil War, every single conflict in every single time span throughout our entire history. Everybody has to get out and go back and do something else, and because it's a young man's game. You can't do what you need to do in the military. Most of us can't do it past about the age of 40 or 45. And most guys, depending on what you do, the higher up the pecking order of physical requirement, in other words, if you do a job in the military that requires massive amounts of physicality on a daily or weekly basis, then your time span, your useful time span in the Army is, generally speaking, is younger than for a guy who doesn't do that, right? And so, I know a lot of guys who are 70, 80, 90% disabled, when they retire, just because they have so many banged up things in their body. They're not all wheeling around in wheelchairs, don't get me wrong, but they have a hard time getting up in the morning and start moving around, and none of them are at home whining about it, and they're all out trying to make a productive life for themselves and their families after they get out of the military. And I just think we've all kind of come to the point where we're I know I have gotten comfortable with the fact that this is something I'm going to chip away at and just continue the transition. It's going to take, when I said earlier it's going to take the rest of my life, it probably won't take the whole rest of my life, but it's going to take a good bit. We'll see.
Yeah, I think what is not common knowledge to a lot of people when they think of, you hear the word disabled veteran or something, and you immediately, not you, people immediately want to resort to, oh, must be a limb or finger, something's missing.
Right.
And just my own personal relationships that I have, in my own family as well, is you could be physically on your game, but disabled, and that becomes a generational thing.
Right.
It becomes, if you don't, I don't know, and there's no answers. I don't know a book. I don't know the person to talk to. I don't know how to do it. But I know that I've experienced it personally. But if you can't somehow, and I'm not telling you where or how, because I don't know, but it can be a generational thing that can get passed down. And I'm just saying that from my own personal experience. It's a tough thing, man. And I talk, not to get into too much details, but there is the awareness now, right? There's the awareness aspect, which I think is a great place to be at, because for so long it was, don't talk about it. There's nothing wrong.
Right. Right. Right.
You got guys who stormed Normandy that, and then continued, if they were lucky enough to continue, that in those developmental stages of their life, with all the other things that are going on, because back in that time, there's severe racism, there's all kinds of things that are happening, and then to compound all those things, and we had no idea what it was like, and then just go, okay, thanks. I have no idea what you're doing now, but go work in a mine, go do whatever you need to do, and and I'll just say, and I can only talk from personal experience, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but 24-year-old coming back, and I can't even imagine, because I walked on the U.S. cemetery in Normandy, a graveyard. I don't know if you've been there, that is white crosses as far as you can see in any direction, and then you start reading them and you realize it's a graveyard full of children that are mostly 19 or maybe 18, maybe a 17-year-old actually, maybe even a 22-year-old, but it's a bunch of kids buried under the ground. And they come back, if they do come back, and actually some of the guys that I was there, because I went to a D-Day ceremony, right? And the guys that made it back, one of them I said, man, he's injured, physically injured. I said, oh man, it seems like all these vets that I'm meeting are injured. And he goes, that's the only way we made it home, was if we got injured. Not all of them, but most of them. And then you come back at 24 years old, and times were so different back then, but just grab a bottle of booze, right?
Right.
And the next thing you know, that becomes how you handle it, because there's no other way to deal with it.
Right.
And I'll share one more story, and I know this isn't about my stories, but I want to share a little bit about.
It's interesting.
But how my eyes became opened, and I was 22 years old when this happened. I was in college, and we went on some field trip, right? And the little van pulls into a McDonald's, and we all go running in and get our Happy Meals or whatever it was. Probably not a Happy Meal, but we come outside, and there's a guy out there, and he's homeless, and he's like, hey, can I get something to eat? Can you help me out with something to eat? And here I am, some dumb punk kid, because I was a dumb punk kid, and I didn't know anything about anything, pretty much, and I was like, no, or whatever I said. I don't remember what I said. And he goes, hey, I'm a veteran. I just need some help. I'm trying to get through town. And I was like, yeah, sure you are. I'm not proud of this, okay? And he says, I really am. I've even got my card right here. And he's reaching into his wallet. He's obviously a homeless guy, right? And I didn't even know what homeless really, truly meant at this time of my life. And he pulls out his card, and he starts to show me like he's got a veteran card. And my dad's a veteran, so I know kind of the deal. But and I was like, oh my gosh, he's not lying to me. He really is a veteran. Damn. And so that was like the first kick to the balls. Like, oh, damn. Okay. And then I was like, poor college kid. Well, I can't really. My excuse in my head was, I can't afford to buy you lunch. I can barely afford my lunch right now. And so, sorry, man, I can't help you out. My professor walks out, and the guy gives the same spiel, the exact same thing. Hey, sir, can you please help me out with some food? And my professor doesn't blink 1 second, grabs him and says, come on in, let's go. What do you want? And takes him back in, buys him a meal, feeds him, and then they hang out for a little bit and they walk back out, and he's like, hey man, have a good day, send you on your way, this and that. Gets back in the van, and I watched this experience like, damn, what was that about? So I'm fortunately to be sitting shotgun now in the van next to him who's driving, so I just asked him, I said, why'd you buy him lunch? And he said, I bought him lunch because my best friend is that guy. He went into Vietnam, became a Navy SEAL, and he came back and he couldn't deal with a job. He couldn't deal with society. He couldn't deal with a lot of things, and so he started jumping trains, and he started traveling across the United States, and he lost track of him, and he has no idea where he is, and he thinks that that guy was put there because he reminded him that his friend's still alive somewhere. And it was like, whoa, to me. Whoa. And I was young, and it made an impression on me, and I'll never forget it. And
Wow.
So anytime, I don't care if someone's lying to me, it's not my business to figure it out. That's not for me to deal with.
I see your point.
What I do
It's
is
a cool story.
I just do it
Yeah.
because I don't
for
know.
sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to go there,
No.
but
No, that's it. I'm glad you told that, and I don't. You know, so now I'm sitting here thinking I wish I had a profound thing to say about veteran homelessness, and I don't. I'm not unaware of it. I don't know anybody that I served with that's become homeless. I know it's a huge problem, and I don't know anything about it.
yeah. I don't know a whole lot about it either, other than I had a personal experience with it,
Right.
and it changed the way I looked at a guy holding the sign because I was so judgmental on.
Right.
Did he really? Is he trying to soak me up? You know, I have all these thoughts, and it's not for me to decide. It's for me to decide if I want to help and give some money
Right.
or some food or whatever it is, and then to deal with if it's the truth. And
Right.
I'm not going to just screw some guy who deserves me to go buy their meal, like you just said. I'm not going to screw them out of that because I'm judging them not knowing. And that's where I'm at. And now I'm not telling you that's how you should be. I'm not saying that that's how it should be. But I had that experience probably for a reason, I think. And I guess and this all started because of, and I'm gonna get off of this. I'm gonna get off this here in a second, because I watched what war did to my grandfather. I watched what that in turn did to my grandmother and to my family in general. I watched it, I experienced it, and it's it can be a tough deal. So I feel for all of you, and I brought it up because I looked down and I see somebody who, when we did this first show, and he's watched Justin be on the show and all these things, and he said, I hope to God one day I can get to the point where they're at, and I can talk about it, and I can come onto your show someday, but it ain't happening right now. And so he said, by people like Justin and another friend of mine openly talking about it, it gave him hope that one day he could probably talk about it too. So I appreciate you being here to talk about your experience, share your
It's a good
life,
conversation to have.
and
It is.
hopefully, if it inspires someone to say, "Hey, I just need to talk about it," because I'll tell you, and I'm not going to tell. I debated on going back and forth. I have a story that nobody knows about here. Only very few people know about in my life that I'm very, very close to. And I thought about today being the day that I talked about it, but I'm not going to. But what I do know is this was, in my early development stages, was a severe moment in my life that I'm lucky to be alive, and not to get into details, but what helped me was to talk about it.
Right.
Because it became common, and everybody wanted to know about it. And I honestly feel that the more I talked about it, it became like, oh, it's not a big deal now because it was just this and that, and it just became like a story you tell about, like Christmas story or something, And so it did help me, and I'm not saying that's the answer, but maybe it is. And if it helps you,
I think for most people, talking about it does help.
yeah,
the whole, the one thing I want to go back to is the post-traumatic stress. Notice I've mentioned PTS now 3 or 4 times, and I don't ever say the D at the end of it because it's not a disorder. It just is what it is.
Amen,
You know,
brother.
I've fortunate enough to sit and listen to a presentation by a guy who does a superb job, Bob Delaney. Talks about some post-traumatic stress that he had as an undercover police officer years ago, and the thing that listening to him talk about his story made me realize that, you know, and there's a lot of vets have post-traumatic stress, but a lot of civilians who've been in car accidents they have post-traumatic stress. A lot of young women who've you know, had miscarriages have post-traumatic stress. The thing that bothers me about it is not that we're having a hard time dealing with it. I think it would be better and easier to deal with if we all acknowledged it and said, because it's kind of become this thing, the PTSD got this definition when we figured it out and started applying it, seems to me, only to vets. And I'm not saying anything bad about that at all, but I think there's a huge portion of the population who also has PTS, and you know,
Yeah.
they don't you know, they don't probably have a chance of having it diagnosed, perhaps,
Yeah.
you know.
And I actually have talked about this quite a bit on this show because I have first responders are showing up, you know, little girls drowning
Right.
for 15 minutes under a frozen pond. And then you grab this 6-year-old and you have to deal with that. And you have a 6-year-old.
Right.
Or, you know, and other just all these stories. And how do you deal with that? And I will tell you what I do know. I do know this. It doesn't matter who it is that I've talked to. Every single person deals with it differently. Every single person deals with it differently, and you need to figure out how you deal with it. And I don't know. No one has the answers, and that's probably part of the problem. Is no one has the actual answer. This is what works. This is what works for me.
I
Maybe
think
the
the most
answer.
common thing that works for the most people, it seems to me, listening to Bob talk and talking to some other people, is having the ability to sit down and talk to somebody about it. You know, and if that means you meet with a couple of your buddies that you served with and, you know, blow off some steam, tell a couple stories about when you were deployed or when you weren't deployed and you were doing training or whatever. You know, one of the things that this guy Bob Delaney talks about when he does his presentation. Bob, if you're watching, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but he goes, if you put you know, a cop and a firefighter and a military guy that have post-traumatic stress in a room, give them a 12-pack, they'll watch a football game, have a couple beers, they think they had a conversation, and they feel better.
Wow.
And they might chat a little bit, but they're spending time with each other. So I think the most common thing is that people probably have a need to talk about it. It helps to get it out, probably repeatedly, but I don't have the answers for most of the rest of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that fact frustrates me. It's you know, I'd rather nobody had to deal with any of it, but I just think if the population of the military since post 9/11 is 0.45%, right? Then that means out of, let's just call it an even 330 million people in the U.S., half of 1 percentage point is, you know, not very many people. So the law of averages is that the 320 million other people across the board, there's plenty of them out there who have post-traumatic stress as well, and maybe them talking about their PTS with a vet who has it also, maybe we can all help each other. It seems like everybody, you know, it's like, oh, well, this is only a vet thing. I don't think it's only a veteran thing. I don't.
You know what I love? I'm in tune to right now is first order of operation is lose the D. Lose the D.
I agree.
I think we need to start that as a community, as a nation. drop the D.
You know, if you're, because it's not a disorder, and I don't mean to sound like I'm being dismissive when I say it is what it is, but when you undergo whatever the stress is that causes post-traumatic stress, I don't think it's a disorder. I just think it's a mental recovery that you have to go through. If your 80-year-old grandmother's driving to the supermarket and she gets hit by a giant pickup truck, she's probably gonna have post-traumatic stress from that because it scared her to death.
Yeah.
You know, even if she opens the door and walks away from it, it's like, wow, that was a close one. She probably is gonna have some issues dealing with that.
Right.
Because it was scary.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
Exactly.
There's no disorder
Exactly.
about it. It's just, like you say, it's what it is. It's just a natural occurrence of what's going to happen in most human beings. We could talk about this topic for a very long time. And I know we've got a lot to do and places to go and things to see. And I sure hope we get to do this again.
Me too.
I
Yeah.
really do.
It's
I
been a
hope
great
we
week
get to come out. I hope we get to do more
Absolutely.
training. I hope we get to spend more time eating burgers without buns together. And I hope we get to eat eggs with butter in them. And I hope that we get to just have a good time, man, and share some
Absolutely.
stories and have
You
you
bet.
back on a show. And even if you don't come on a show, and even if we don't, you're always welcome here in Idaho. I hope we get some more time together and
Appreciate that.
go
Thank
spend
you.
some time on the lake, kill some animals,
Yeah.
eat some barbecue, some fresh
Absolutely.
meat,
That'd be
campfires. I love it all. So
Be awesome.
we here at Alien Gear have a few things for you, and for Kevin as well. And we have a few things for you guys too. We're gonna get to that in a second. But I've got a bunch of cool stuff. We've got some gun belts for you, Bigfoot gun belts for you.
Okay.
We've got some mag
Wow.
carriers. I don't know. I can't remember what all is in the goodie boxes over there. We're gonna get you hooked up
Very
and
cool.
dialed in,
Thank you.
and we can never give you enough, other than maybe just hand you the company, to say thank you.
I appreciate that.
Like,
It means
seriously.
a lot. Thank you.
And not just for your service and your sacrifice, but for Jason spent a lot of time coming up with all the drills and all the material and all the things that we're going to cover. Put a lot of care and passion into this training. And one of the overall themes that I got, even in comments from you guys, was, wow, this guy's passion. He's explained it so well. And when you love what you do, you never go to work a day in your life. And it's very, very obvious that you chose the right road for your life. And even though you say it's selfish, you get to take that selfish act and now be selfless and help other people like myself, help protect my family. Like people who had never shot a gun, and you watched it, I'm not going to say who it was, become, maybe not ever shot a gun, but very, very rarely shoot a gun, to go on and have the competition and pretty much win this competition between all the people there. And
Right.
you can watch that person, I witnessed that person go, man, this is fun.
Right.
And I think people who maybe don't own firearms, never shot one, if they had an opportunity to come out to something like this, and maybe this is an idea that we come up with, and,
Yeah.
and we bring people out who've never shot a gun, never been around them, and then show them how bonding it can be, team building, and just stress relieving and fun, you know? And so maybe we'll work on some certain things like that. But we couldn't thank you enough for coming out here. Really excited.
Happy to
We're
do
really
it.
excited to do more in the future. We definitely want to have Jason back here and Kevin as well. And we just thank you guys for making the trip out and putting in all the time, because you're going to see these videos. They're going to be all over our YouTube channel. We're going to be posting them on Facebook as well. Extremely valuable. And a lot of the things that I'm going to talk a little bit about the training, but I know we got to wrap this up. Some of the things that he was teaching isn't instructional things like, hey, you need to do this or you need to do that. So some of the stuff was cool because he's like, if it works for you, that's what works. But also like, oh, I love this cartridge. You know, when you eject your cartridge, you eject it into your hand, because when you're doing your work, it's usually in the dark. You can't pull out a flashlight to find the cartridge. You can't do all these things. So you learn how to essentially do mag changes and all these things blindfolded, like in the dark. And you're teaching us things that you learned from real life things, not like textbook stuff. And I've always been really, that's how I like to learn is, you know, you're teaching us real life on top of all the fundamentals and stuff, but really cool things you've gathered from your real life experience. And that's above and beyond like the textbook kind of stuff. And it's just cool. And there's so much, you're just a cool dude, man. We really have,
appreciate that.
and humble and all that. And we really just had such an awesome time here. And I can't wait to get these videos up for you guys. And they're going to be content you can go back and watch forever. And it won't get old. And I don't mean by getting old like, oh, this is getting old. I'm talking about in 10 years from now, these fundamental things will still be very valid and true. And anybody who goes, hey, I think I'm going to buy my first handgun, I don't know where to start, is going to benefit from it. Anybody who, I can promise you this because we watched it, who already thinks like, I don't need a whole lot of training. I'm really good at what I do. I've been shooting for a long time. And then they go, damn, I needed that. Damn, I needed that.
We all need it.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely.
So we have a lot more to come. Again, Jason, thank you so much for being here, brother.
Thanks for
It's
having
been-
me.
been
Had
such
great
an honor
week here.
and a pleasure.
Really enjoyed the hell out of this.
Me
Thank
too,
you.
man. And we got more to come. We have a couple things that we need to give away here real quick. First of all, I just want to say, if you wanted this firearm right here, this was donated by Arc Defense with the red dot sight. It's a Glock. I don't want to get too involved on this whole giveaway stuff right now because this has been a great show. And I'm just going to tell you right now, if your name is Nicholas Gregory, you won yourself a firearm. Congratulations to you, Nicholas. We're also going to give away a sling. This is a Second Amendment sling from Slight Tactical and the sling attachments. I don't know if Kevin is here. Did we pick a winner of this Second Amendment sling yet?
Steve Childs.
Steve Childs. Congratulations to you, Steve Childs. Direct message us. You got yourself the sling and the sling attachments, front and rear sling attachments. We're going to have Kevin back. We're going to be talking about Slight Tactical and their slings here, hopefully very soon, maybe in the next week or so on a live video. And just both of you guys, man, thank you so much. And I know all of us at Alien Gear really appreciate your time and your expertise. And we were going to be bringing it to you, all of you. So thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend. And we will see you all next week. Back to our regular scheduled programs. And we want you to do a couple things. Train safe, train often, and then carry safe and carry in comfort. Carry on.
I said, man, I'm telling you, glad you made it because we were training for the invasion of Japan.
Report